cancel the meeting, but I didn't do Alderman list.
The lady has bought 3 or 4.
I thought you did. Okay.
Oh, well, I think I sent it to Regina and.
Nikita. Hi there.
How's MML going? Oh, no, I haven't either. Yeah.
And I was just trying to send you guys an email to join that joint meeting. Either I can't go to finance or I can't go to the joint meeting. This morning, yeah. So I've got to get my stuff done after the meeting. So Wednesday. Oh my gosh.
What am I missing? What are you talking about? Is there a meeting I'm supposed to be at?
No, we're trying to schedule a joint meeting.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right. Did you read what I wrote down? Can I say we don't need to look at something?
Oh,
The tree pruning? Yeah.
Jacqueline said that it would come back to you.
Oh, it would?
Yeah.
So silly, but okay. Is she okay with that? All right. It's not, I'm sure they're doing it anyways, yeah.
In my development process.
Sheila. No, I thought you were talking about Airbnb. I was like,
Oh, not even
oh,
Airbnb.
I heard you say rentals. I'm like, I'm not listening. I'm not listening.
I have homeowners meetings at 6:30.
When I worked in the department, they would call. I would call for someone from the home association
To find
to
out.
find out. Yeah.
I mean, there are like 8 on my street. And at least 3 of them, 4 of them, I believe, they use a little different name, all the same person.
We're canceled. Transportation.
Oh yeah, I just saw.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I wrote, sorry about it.
Pete, may I ask you a question? But it's about a consent.
Is it on record?
Does it need to be? I just don't know if it's factored into this report.
So we categorize rental as a separate, it's part of what we
So
categorize
is
rental.
necessity the goddess, or is that an expiration date?
It's got to be expiration date.
Yeah, it has to be, because it's
Yeah.
19.
Yeah.
And these are all,
Vernacular, which is a 10-day inspection, the light fast ATV, and license is up and we need to inspect it.
okay, and if it's under review?
Then they've applied and they expect to be inspected.
Okay, and they're actively inspected once a year? Whether they want it or not. So you, sorry, I have to take off. I have a 6:30 meeting.
Yeah, no, and I know like it was in case people want to go to the 5 p.m. reception, we're moving this to I don't know.
5 p.m. reception is?
Yeah, everyone knows, I think.
Oh.
No. I told Shanika I did this for support because she's giving a remark. We can get started whenever. Thank you.
I'm ready.
I'll call to order the meeting of the Economic Matters Committee October 11th at 4:07 p.m. We need all members are present and accounted for. Hi. We're going to make this kind of quick because I know there's MML and everything like that. But thank you again for coming. Today's agenda is just light. We're just going to do, and what I wanted to start doing was a couple of just, a monthly update just to kind of have that continuous, conversation and hopefully have some good work product come out of committee.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the minutes for the July 17th meeting.
Great, thank you.
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So with that, I've invited Hollis and Hope, as well as Eric, to just give us, just a short, brief update of what's going on and what you're looking forward to and how we can best support it, and then we'll do that kind of every month. Sounds good? You want us to start? Come up and start? Yeah, just come to the table, please.
Do you want to move the appointment first?
What appointment?
Kim Finch?
Oh, I think I'm going off the draft agenda. Got it. So she's not here? Oh, well, before we start, I'll...
Do you want to postpone that until maybe she makes it?
Yeah, should we? All right, is there a motion to postpone the recommendation of appointment of Kim Finch to the Historic Preservation Commission?
Mr. Chair, I'll just suggest that we set it aside because she may come in during the meeting. I don't think we should postpone it and then she walk in and we can't address her.
Good call, thank you. All right, we'll just postpone it till the end. Hi. Just want to go ahead. Good morning, or good afternoon, I don't know what day it is.
I'm Hollis Minor, Economic Development Manager of the city. It's on. Can you not hear me though?
Pull it closer.
Hollis Minor, Economic Development Manager. Not knowing exactly what you want to know,
Yeah.
I'll just kind of give you a brief description of what we normally work on a day-to-day basis. And I did bring the strategic plan, our 12 to 18 month work plan, and a PowerPoint that sort of printout that tells you what we really do and what economic development is all about. It's the PowerPoint that we use when we go out to business organizations to let their members know all of the wonderful resources that are available to them. So, but some of the things that we normally do, we site selection services. So if a business needs to move or expand, we help them find a place to do that. The permitting and zoning guidance, that can be a little challenging for especially new small businesses. Business financing, so we connect them, the county, who we work with on a day-to-day basis as well, has a full loan staff. I mean, they have 5 people on staff just in the loan department. And all of their loans are available to the city businesses, but a lot of city businesses don't know that. So we make sure that we connect them with the proper financing that they might be able to get. We do technical business support services, so a lot of times a business just calls with a question, and very often business oriented, not necessarily regulatory oriented. So we can help connect them with whatever resources they need to move ahead. We help promote Annapolis as a premier business location. We do market research. That might be at the request of a business, or it might be at the request of one of the departments. Program development, so we will create events or classes based on what the businesses have said that they need to understand better. And then we get involved a little bit in workforce development. Today, workforce is such a big component. At one time it was very separate from economic development, but it's front and center now. And it's harder and harder to find employees in a very low unemployment period. So people are having a lot of difficulty. So we've been helping with job fairs and connecting people to training grants. And I would say that probably 30% of our time is spent conducting one-on-one business consultations. 30% is creating and implementing marketing and program event activities. About 20% of our time is to help shape city economic development related policy or legislation. And then about 20% is the economic studies or market research.
Could we have copies of?
Absolutely, I brought numerous sets, so everybody gets one. I didn't know if I could just hand them to you or what.
We're not very fancy or formal here, don't worry.
Okay, well, I wasn't sure. I don't have to step outside rules. So there's a number of them there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Hollis and
And
everyone,
so
just, I
we'll-
mean, I don't know where these conversations are going either. That's why I
Right,
think we
yeah.
should just, we just,
Exactly.
and we'll go from there. So
Exactly.
Just
And,
start
and
somewhere.
just for your knowledge, I mean, Hope's role really is, she's focusing somewhat on the minority business population.
Mhm.
So we've got Hispanic business classes going, the
Yeah.
Hispanic
Yeah, that's a good one.
roundtables. So, we're doing as much as we can, and also to get those types of businesses hooked into government contracting.
So that's a question I had that has been on my mind a lot is the government contracts to minority businesses, and then kind of what goals and what kind of legislation is permitted around supporting or meeting those goals. So I know some cities have done stuff like set targets of 20 or 30% of government contracts go to minority owned. Is that something that we have, or we could look at?
The problem with diversity programs, formal ones, is that it requires a diversity study, which is about $100,000. They have to identify that there's a need for it. So
Yeah.
Anne Arundel County, a lot of jurisdictions don't go that route, but they have somebody on staff to help those small businesses compete.
Yeah, you mean legally to be like constitutional,
Yep.
yeah.
And I know that Teresa Sutherland has her eye on the procurement issues and parameters, and maybe as we move forward, if not necessarily a smaller minority or a minority business goal, maybe buy local, like Montgomery County, their companies get first shot at stuff. So, we might
we
want to
don't.
think through things like that.
Yeah, actually, because there's this one, Free State Printing, I remember had a kind of a complaint around that, being the only kind of local, or one of the only local shops. I forget what the specifics around it were, but that's
Yeah.
an example of how we go out sometimes really far instead
Yep.
of.
But this would be a perfect opportunity at this time, since they're looking at procurement, to start thinking through and being a part of helping shape that.
May I ask about the minority set-asides? Because the county does have minority set-asides, do they
No.
not?
Nope. They
There's
have
not
a
a
goal.
percentage?
They have a
uh,
goal.
No, I'm talking about, and I'm going back 10 years or more, when the Black Chamber worked very diligently with the county to get a percentage of minority set-asides.
But it's just a goal. It's not legally binding.
And the school board also, or,
That I don't know. I don't know about the school system. Because the AA, the public school system is a separate buying entity from the county completely. So I'm not familiar with their
Okay.
particular rules.
because we had this discussion some time ago about setting a percentage for minority businesses, small and minority businesses. And I'm not sure why it never went, but most municipalities have a set-aside program. So I'm not sure about any unconstitutionality that would affect us.
There's another way that you can look at it too versus a certain percentage set aside. I'm on the advisory board also for BG&E, and instead of doing a percentage, they make sure that a percentage of their applicants are minorities. So they say if you have a certain percentage of your minorities are applying for a job and you have a diverse panel that is hiring, your company will become diverse with the best talented pool. And then you can come out and say, I'm really hiring the best qualified, and it will include minorities, versus the perception sometimes that someone was hired because of a certain aspect of them, and then they can be looked down upon their peers. So the way they did it, it takes that stigma away, and it says people are hired by being the best qualified, but you make sure that your pool is diverse before you accept any bids or hiring. And if it's not, you go, we're not doing proper outreach, and you resubmit your bid, or your RFP or your hiring practice before you make the hiring.
Can you tell me how that has worked out for them?
If you look at the board of directors for BG&E, it is very diverse.
The board of directors?
Their board, you look at their board of directors, and you look at their staffing, they are a very diverse company. The president of BG&E is African American, they got women, they got Asians, they got Hispanics. all serving on their board and all serving on their hiring panels.
So that sounds like we can be assured that there's some oversight.
Yes.
We're talking about contracts also, so.
But you can say that your contracts, you know, that you want, you know, X percent of your people that are bidding on a contract to be a minority. And if that is the case, you know, there's a good chance one of them will be hired to their qualifications versus saying we're doing it just because you are a female or a certain ethnicity.
Well, and as an African-American woman, I hate to look at it that way because it is looking at qualified people, as you say. But we're in a world where we know that just because you're qualified doesn't mean that you
can also have a diversified panel that helps
know.
make the selection as well, and that keeps everybody honest at the table.
So I would be interested in knowing what percentage of their awarded contracts actually go to minorities and women.
Most of those larger firms have a very strong diversity program, and they hold their managers' feet to the fire to have 30 to 35% go to minorities. And that, you know, in outside government, you know, they'll be fired if they don't do it. Inside government, like at the state, they also hold agency department heads to that standard. It's still only a goal.
Yeah.
But.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think that's definitely something we should be looking at as a goal.
Yeah, I agree. And how do we make that into policy and potential legislation?
We did draft up a minority enterprise procurement policy. We didn't have one in place. So there is a draft, and it has been sent to the procurement officer for review. So I think he has to discuss it with the city manager.
Will that come to us?
It should. Can I share? I don't know the process, but I can ask. Yeah, I can share the draft if you'd like to take a look at it.
Yeah, I think we should.
And I think included there are goals included. We just haven't set them yet.
Well, that's great. And because I know the city manager, even before she became the city manager, her report included the need for procurement legislation, which we have not really.
And the most important part is creating the process and policy to track that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we do that.
Yeah, my question was going to be starting from exactly. Do we know what percentage of our government contracts right now go towards? I don't know if we have that data.
I don't know if we do either.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised we don't have anything like that. I mean, we have procurement guidelines that I think there might even be requirements in the code for environmental purchasing. I'm surprised we don't have anything for
So that'd be. I see. I knew this would go somewhere.
May I ask another question? How do you, as the economic development manager, get these titles right, interface with Brian Callahan? Because I'm still not sure what his title is and how it relates to what you do.
Brian visits on a fairly regular basis.
Visits you or visits the business?
Both of us.
Okay.
And, you know, we have some sense of what's going on in the mayor's office, but not a whole lot. So I was invited this week to start attending their staff meetings as well, the mayor's office staff meetings, so we can all kind of get on the same page.
Well, I understand, and I heard from Alderwoman Henson that they're very informative about what staff is doing, and I asked that maybe we should get a copy of their report weekly or monthly or however frequently they have meetings, so we too will know what's going on with those staff. So
they have a report? They have a report?
I know some of the
I don't know
members-
whether they actually have a report, but I think it would be nice if they're having staff meetings to share what's going on with staff.
minutes of some
Yep.
kind, maybe? Or minutes of some kind?
Or minutes, yeah. It doesn't have to be an official report. That sounds grand. I'm not thinking
I think it's
a lot of extra work, but
I think
notes
it's
from what's going on.
important to the
Yeah.
quality of our economy that we all appear to be a joined team out in public. And right now, there's kind of a separation, and then we've got to go out and face our constituents without really knowing what's going on, so.
Let's see, might you be talking about a recent incident? I'm not even going to say it. My other question had to do with Conference and Visitors Bureau. Because you mentioned something that kind of triggered that question about how you interface with them.
Yep. Well, I have a monthly business leaders meeting where all of the executive directors and/or board chairs from the city's business organizations, and there's a lot of them, come together to share information. And Eric is on their board of VAC, so you know, I kind of have a first-hand viewpoint. But yes, so they participate with us, and then we're all sort of connected.
Well, and I can't say that I've noticed recently, but over the last year, there's been a significant increase of TV ads for Annapolis that have been paid for by the Conference and Visitors Bureau, which we truly, truly appreciate because we can't afford to do it. I just wonder how much benefit, you know, we are having because they are doing this for us.
They put out regular reports on the number of visitors go to their website or to their visitor center, and their traffic to both is up this year. They also track hotel occupancy, which is up countywide. It is down a little bit. It's not growing in the city, but it is growing countywide. And part of that might be that our hotels here in town all changed hands this past year. They've all been sold. And so whenever you're selling a business, you cut back your own staffing and marketing to save money because you know you're getting ready to shut your operation down. And then it takes time for the new operators to get in place and get everything back and running. So the hotels kind of all had a little bit of some small, but it was a little bit of a downturn here in the city, and that's why I think it happened. But countywide, heads and beds have increased this year.
I don't mean to belabor this, but what does it mean when all the hotels in your city all sell in the same year?
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing?
It means investors are looking at the city again as a viable place to invest.
Okay.
So I don't know what the Waterfront Hotel is going to spend to remodel, but I know they're talking about remodeling. The former Lowe's Hotel, they're talking about spending in the neighborhood of $15 million to renovate after purchasing a building, which helps property values. And then we also have, you know, the Westin sold. I don't know if they're going to remodel or not. They're restructuring their staff. And then we have another downtown hotel that's kind of on the books, potentially going up across from the police station. So that means, you know, the private investor believes hotel business is very good here in Annapolis.
What was the last one you mentioned?
There's a proposed hotel across the street from the police station on Taylor Avenue that's proposed.
Oh, okay.
I think it's 149 room.
Is that in place of the one that was supposed to go on City Dock? You know, I know I'm asking all the
I'll pedal around that one.
politically incorrect questions. And forgive me, but it is what it is. I'm in your ear. You're in my ear. So. Okay, thank you.
Now? Oh, okay. Hi, I'm just visiting. But on that, it's in review. What's the review before special exception? I got drawings on that. It's the developer of Park Place, Mr. Parks.
Jerry Parks.
The son is proposing. I think it's like a Hilton type place, 137, 139 rooms. So, and it's in that. It's part of their initial property that they kind of left out, and it's really oddly shaped, and it's in Fred's ward, and there probably might be some pushback from the adjacent residents in Fred's ward. But
That's not where the theater was supposed to go.
no, it's beyond.
Beyond
It's next to
that?
the cleaners, kind of in that.
Between the Lowe's Access Road and Heidler's.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a
okay.
real yucky piece of land. But I have okay, so, but let's talk, just real quickly, and thank you for let's try to look at lessons learned and try to support the mayor. For example, on the bike path thing, would he be able to come to you and say, hey, I want to do a bike lane, what is going to be the effect to the Main Street businesses? Is that where, would he be able to, is that part of your responsibility? Would you be able, do you understand my question?
I do.
Yeah.
And I will say that providing data is going to be very difficult for a project like that. But we can certainly help him move it forward in an easier manner, in a better manner.
Mm-hmm.
We can help
facilitate or
yeah.
communicate. Okay.
Yeah.
And then and for example, on Market House, I believe you did a market analysis for that RFP. Okay. And my last question is, for the hotel development at City Dock, would you be able to do a market analysis as far as how many hotel rooms, and did he ask you for that, or
No.
is that something that you could provide if that ever came up
Well,
again? I'm just trying to use you as a resource,
right.
so that we can get it right
Yep.
and not
In-
stumbling over
In
each
the
other.
cases of developments like that,
Uh-huh.
usually the developer does the feasibility study.
Okay.
And,
Market.
I'm sort of the mind that if they're gonna come here and spend millions of dollars and they've decided that
Yeah,
they've done all their data analysis, then
yeah.
I'm usually willing to assume that they've done their homework. But we could help with that. That might actually have to go, we might have to get the visitor center to help with something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe our hotel occupancy right now is about 72%, which is much
Yeah.
higher than the national
It's
average.
high, yeah. It's a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. So if we just back up a sec, can you explain your relation with the Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation?
Yes. I spend 2 days a week in their offices and the rest of the time here in the city. And they have a staff of about 20. And, we actually have an assigned liaison there for the city. And so I work with them on events and programming and marketing the city and, helping connect our businesses to their loan department. So it's a great relationship. I kind of get a full team out of it. And then they get somebody that focuses only on the city. So it's good for them too. They spend a lot of effort on North County, North and West County. So this is a good way to ensure that we stay one of the economic drivers that they pay attention to.
Okay, good. And so you mentioned in here helping with site selection services and for choices of business development, expansion, relocation. What kind of help would you offer for expansion? Because I'm asking because I have a few businesses, I think I may have mentioned this, a few businesses in my ward who were looking to expand, but
Right.
we're getting a lot of pressure from our resistance from the management company. So I was just wondering, can your office or does your office kind of offer to champion those local businesses that we have to help them expand, or advocate for them with the larger management companies?
That we have not done in the past. I don't know where the liability extends to something like that. We generally guide the business and direct them. We don't tell them what to do. So that might get a little too into the weeds on negotiating for a business. We can certainly help them understand how to negotiate with their landlord, but I don't think we should be there to do it with them or for them. But we can help them look for spaces that would be complementary to the type of business that they are and that they'd be in the proper zone. So that's another big question that stymies some businesses. They go into the wrong area and before they ever talk to the city. And so it can be.
Pete says that's not true.
But the site expansion or the site selection is another tool that we get to use at the county. The software to do that is like $20,000, and all we pay them for then is a $1,400 seat, a licensed seat. So I can do that for them, and it's a great service because most brokers, they want to sell their own stock. So this is a great way for a business to get a full array of what's available around the city, and then they can contact the brokers directly of the places they're interested in.
Okay. And how about with local, did you do anything to kind of encourage or let the new businesses know about just hiring locals and or connecting the local unemployed with the new businesses that are coming in?
We work very closely with AAWDC,
Okay.
with workforce development.
Yeah.
They're experts in that. We're not, in workforce development. So we have gotten involved in helping promote a lot of the job fairs. But we rely on them to set those up and to run them, and have the experts there to counsel the businesses, whether that be for expungement services or transportation, interviewing, resumes. So we rely on them really to do that. The only thing that we get super involved with in terms of workforce development is the county, again, has a training grant. They'll reimburse up to 50% of a training that a business might need to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or specific to policy right now? I don't know if Hope or Eric, do you want to update on anything? How was Dining Under the Stars? How did it turn out? I went a few times. It was great. What's on the horizon?
Sure, we did just finish up doing 17 Dinner Under the Stars events this year, which was a full house every Wednesday night this year, so that was a great economic impact to the restaurants. We have one more for Sunday Festival. We do 8 of those a year with 150 vendors, 4 performance stages. They are a huge economic development. They bring 7,000 to 10,000 people every first Sunday to downtown Annapolis. We had the Chocolate Binge Festival coming up in December, which, just to kind of give you ideas and numbers, has already been seen by, I think, 1.4 million people on social media, with 60-some thousand people that have expressed interest in coming to visit our city because of that event.
The Chocolate Binge?
Yes.
Wow.
Last year it was a 3 million reach. Dinner on the Stores has incredible numbers like that. And just to kind of give you a comparison, because my budget is this big compared to, let's say, like the Visitor Center might be this big. The Visitor Center gets about 900,000 visitors to their website in a year. So just to kind of give you a comparison to the amount of traffic. We have Midnight Madness events, 3 of them coming up this year. We're already marketing those. Small Business Saturday coming up in November. We partner with a lot of different organizations. So we had the Military Bowl coming up, and we work on how to partner so that they do a wine walk or a pub crawl, or bringing the Clydesdales back after the event or before the event for a meet and greet, just to try to make sure that there is economic impact on the businesses, and it's not just bring people to a stadium who turn around and get in their cars and go back home. So I'm always looking for ways to do partnerships. Working now with Four Rivers Heritage Area on Maryland Day, which works with all the historic properties in the Annapolis area in South County to help market that event. Working with the Chesapeake Children's Museum on how to get them more involved in the community, so we all share resources instead of reinventing the wheel, so that we can all work better.
The Military Bowl.
Yes.
31st this year, isn't it?
Yes.
New Year's Eve. I suspect they're going to be coming to us to ask about waiving fees. About $30,000, isn't it? Or 28 or something like that. There may be some leverage for you in developing a partnership with them. I suspect it may go a long way for the council if we know that they're working with our local downtown partnership program and the Economic Development Office. I don't know what you're planning, whether, are you part of the New Year's Eve celebration, or?
So for the last 2 years, I have helped the city manage at no charge the New Year's Eve celebrations. I helped renegotiate contracts to lower costs so that we could create a new family event out by Maryland Hall for New Year's Eve without increasing the budget, so that we could do more for our residents without increasing the city budget. I have worked for the last 2 years with the Military Bowl on doing a wine walk and a pub crawl. And then last year we were able to create a Meet the Clydesdale event in Annapolis, and that will be returning again this year. This year, because of the event being on the 31st, we'll actually have a Meet the Clydesdales the day before on Sunday. And we're still in the early stages. We've had 2 meetings to kind of discuss different ways to handle that. And it comes down to, it always comes down to money, on what you're able to do and what they're able and willing to pony up, and sponsors we're able to find to make things happen.
I just thought it might be an opportunity to broach them on some increase.
If you could strong arm them to giving us more to help make more partnerships for downtown, God bless you.
So,
And I saw that the signs on Maryland Avenue are back.
Yes.
Thanks for that.
I was going to say, that was something else that was out of our hands.
Yeah, I don't know, Hope, if you want to say anything.
Well, just one update. Next week is our 4th Hispanic Business Roundtable. You came to the first
Yeah,
one,
thank you,
and
yeah.
it has been great. It's been wonderful. The whole purpose we set it up is because we're really lacking a Hispanic business network in the city, and that it means they don't have access to resources, sometimes knowledge, sometimes training gaps. So what happens is we have about 20 people that come and sit around a table. Sometimes we have a speaker, sometimes they just talk. And it's been a very, very positive experience. I'm very pleased with how it's gone. And Adriana Lee comes, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I've heard good, amazing feedback from both people who attend and,
Yeah,
other people.
no, so we're very proud of how that's gone so far. Right, and then we'll be planning some minority business roundtables with AADC, so.
We've got a meeting set up next week to get started on that.
mhm.
That's great. That's great.
So, yeah, if you all have any ideas, we're happy to listen to them and see what we can do to execute them, so.
may I ask, do you interface with SOFO at all, or SOFLO?
Mhm.
They come to the business leaders meeting.
Okay. Are they promoting, I know when they started, they only promoted businesses up to Chinkapin Round Road.
Right.
Are they now inclusive, and therefore the name's South Forest Drive as opposed to Forest Drive? Anyway, are they now being more inclusive of the Hispanic, particularly businesses that are on Old Forest Drive, that go all the way out to Route 2?
According to their president, yes, that they have extended all the way out to the end of Forest Drive now.
Okay.
I don't know how actively they've, included, but I'm sure they've been invited to member meetings and things like that. But
Mhm.
I don't know what the outcome is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
Roxana
Mhm.
Rodriguez from Caliente Grill, she's an active member.
Yeah, but she's on the side of Forest Drive. I'm talking about the other end of Forest Drive that
Oh.
was not included initially.
Yeah, I understood the same thing, that they'd extended it all the way to like Cine Fronteras area, kind of.
To Route, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But to Hope's point, I don't know how, like, yeah.
Mhm.
How engaged those businesses have
Right.
been, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think that SOFO did just win an award, right?
They did.
From the Chamber of Commerce. What did they
Yes,
get?
nonprofit of the year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because they're doing a lot of great work besides supporting their business
Yes.
members, but in the community, like the
Yes.
middle school fence revitalization, movie night,
Beautification.
beautification.
Of the corridor, they're very active, good
Well,
group.
that's good.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't realize they were a nonprofit.
Yeah, me neither. That's great.
Thanks.
Let's see. Well, there was actually, talking about Forest Drive corridor, this bleeds in a little into the legislation for today, because I know, and I guess, I just want to say something on it, and then maybe Ellie, as the sponsor of the bill, you can give a little bit of background and context. And then, I mean, I at least have some questions and agree with some of the feedback, for example, that Eric provided before, specific to this legislation, so we can get into that. But reading the staff report, and Pete, maybe you can talk about this a little bit, because I did notice that a majority of so it says non-residential buildings account for 26% of land uses in the city. The vacancy rate averages around 5%, but the majority of those vacancies are along the Forest Drive corridor. Interesting. I don't know why I had assumed that it was downtown, but it's.
Yeah, I can talk. I mean, you can talk to, I got that information from Hollis. So what,
Can you
it
repeat
was based on square footage, was the, I'm sorry.
Oh, so basically,
I was asking him to repeat the data he was just giving.
so in the staff report it indicates that, talking about non-residential buildings, which the legislation 04018, obviously talks about vacancies around there. It said, so it said 26% of the land uses in the city are made up of non-residential buildings, so storefronts, commercial buildings, office buildings. And the vacancy rate averages around 5%, but it says that the majority of the vacancies, of the non-residential vacancies, are along the Forest Drive corridor.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Could I speak to that?
Mm-hmm.
The reason that is because the MAIF building, once it was bought, went on the rolls, went into the broker database as empty, 120,000 square feet.
So it's by square feet.
So it drives that vacancy rate in Forest Drive way, way up. So once it's filled, it'll probably come down to about 3.5%, is the way I looked at it. So it's not
Okay.
a big worry.
Yeah, that shook me a little, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Is that the MAIF building you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Now, Mastercraft is still empty, and that building, and there's still lots of places that could use some fixing up over there.
Yeah, no, definitely. So hopefully, so with that, I guess, if everyone's okay, we can go into the legislation a little bit.
Sure.
Ellie, do you want to talk a little bit about, just a, yeah.
This is simply registration,
Turn your mic
after the recession, this became nationwide, mostly because of residential vacancies and foreclosures, that this became sort of a trend, focused on residential and commercial, residential being more of a blight, life safety issue, commercial being more of a property owner taking ownership of his property, acknowledging that his storefront being vacant for an indefinite amount of time may be detrimental to the city's economy. Specifically in Annapolis, one would say that the free market should help us. It should be let go and let the free market regulate. And unfortunately in Annapolis, there's a handful of business owners that have almost become their own market, and the pattern has been that buildings have been left vacant for the highest bidder, if you will, and the highest rent, if you will. Usually those are with high margins, or such as a souvenir store, t-shirt, or restaurant, and the rents don't come down. And unfortunately, specifically downtown, if you talk to some of the businesses, their rent, some of them are paying higher than they would on M Street in Georgetown, which brings me to why this. It's my engineering approach in, okay, what is my objective? There is no reason why there should be a vacancy in downtown Annapolis. I just don't believe that there should be. We're the capital of Maryland, stone throw away from the water and from the State House, and I believe that property owners have been taking advantage of this. A lot of them don't live here, they are out of state, they write them off, so they're getting sort of a double benefit. Washington, D.C. has thrived. They are thriving. They have enclaves of retail that are anywhere from kitchen supply stores to bicycle shops to little grocery stores, that whole balance that we don't have here. So something's broken. And talking to my counterpart in Washington DC and others and in many states and doing research, San Antonio, anywhere from San Antonio, Texas to Hyattsville, one of the first steps in dealing with this is to get the building owners, once they have a vacancy, to simply register them. It simply is an ownership tool. I have a vacant property and I want to register it. And it's $250. The fees are comparable, and they're to cover the cost of doing this registration. DC has just announced that they're accepting their registrations online, which has made the manpower, a lot easier. And San Antonio, for example, has been self-sufficient. They've made, I don't know the numbers, but like $70 or something thousand their first year of registering these. But again, they might have that bigger area and all that. So again, this is just for commercial. DC has done both. A lot of these towns have done both commercial and residential. And residential would get really hairy because you're usually looking at, and some of the cities have extended their grace period from 30 to 90 days. There has to be an outreach, especially in different communities. This isn't a, this is, and there's some sort of there's just some kind of it's not, I'm not sure how you record it, but there is something to say about this working in DC and just having this visible ownership. And the placard is at 8.5 by 11. Just like if you're getting your house remodeled or in DC, it's that, it's not this orange thing that says vacant. And so it shows, as you're walking around DC, that's what caught my eye, is that there was a vacancy, and it says this product, this storefront or whatever, this property became vacant at such and such a date and has to comply with such and such. It has to be kept, kept maintained, or, code compliance. And there it is. So that's, I just think that it's something we must do, and some cities did it as a pilot, and then renewed it because it was successful.
So, sorry, the goal is then, I think it's great, and thank you, Ellie, for introducing this. And so the goal is, to reduce or eliminate storefront vacancies.
Ultimately, that's the goal. And then the city will have this registry of owners, and they'll work with them, and then on some of them and what will happen is if they don't register, like the second year, if they don't rent, the fee goes up only because then it gets a little bit more difficult in going back to them and saying, hey, how come you're not? So it puts them on the radar. Especially these out-of-state owners. It gives them a responsibility, and it seems to be working in these other towns.
And is the incentive around like, because the register is vacant and everyone now knows that there's vacancy there and that they have to comply with this, it's kind of a wake-up call for them to be like, let's be more proactive about it. Or is this registry, because when I was thinking of the vacancy registration, there could also be a tool, if it's publicly available, let's say on the city's website or whatever, of all the vacancies, it could also be an additional tool for people looking for storefronts and so forth. I don't know how you monitor that today, but it could be.
That's a good point.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you said about the registration online, maybe that could be something that we require.
I mean, the thing to consider is that there are people devoted to this. I mean, in a big city like DC, okay, for example, they had 3 people devoted to it. And I know it, and that's what Peter's concerned. But I did send him something on it being available online now, which helps a little bit. But when you see one owner, having 6 properties, and then you see this pattern, they will be able to focus on the problem children.
Well, and that's what the question was around the fiscal impact report, the staff report, was that with that 26%. I was like, could we get that in number of actual units or storefronts, so let's say that 5% of that 26% is 50 or 100 commercial properties or storefronts. And so let's assume, you know, half are gonna pay the fee or register properly, and that's 250 times 25, and that's potential amount of money that you're gonna have for enforcement. I mean, I don't know, is there a way to kind of narrow that?
That would be ideal.
Well, I mean, first of all, as you know, any of my fees, any of my citations, where does that go? To the general fund. So it's not dedicated to anything, but anyways, that being said, as Ellie and I have discussed how this will work, I mean, I don't think that this will work in terms of, hey, my property's vacant, can I give you $250? It's gonna be ring, ring, yeah, we've got, you know, we're gonna cite you, give you a notice and say, hey, your property's been vacant, come to our attention. Then they're gonna follow up and say, yeah, but I've been trying to lease it. And they said, okay, so we have 6 months. We follow up 6 months later and said, okay, your 6 months is over. Oh, well, now I'm gonna try and sell it. So now, do I have a year from that date or do I have 6 months from that date? So it gets into this enforcement cycle of having to follow up, because then they won't pay the fee, and then we end up in court because and we cite them because they didn't pay the fee to register. So I'm just trying to paint the world of my rental license. Are we chasing the people down for these things? So it's interesting that she said, I was wondering how many people, because I did go to the website and looked at DACRA or whatever it's called, and in DC, and that there's 3 people dedicated to that. I have 3 people dedicated for just the property maintenance code alone, and that keeps them busy 24/7, and they're playing catch up with just the rental licenses, not to mention the property maintenance codes. So that when we have violations with people not maintaining their property. So it is a concern of mine, and I raised it. How to quantify that, I can't. If it's simply just, you know, as we discussed, the $250 of somebody processing an application because they came to the counter and said, here's my $250, and we hand them their little placard to put on there, that's great. But that's not how it always works out. In fact, that's, you know, that's probably about half the time of the way it'll work out, because they're not willing to tell you that they're vacant, or they have every excuse in the book why they're meeting all the exemptions. And the online is a great idea. I saw that too, and that's a great idea, but as you notice, there's all this documentation that they have to provide through that online process. So when they don't provide that information online, we have to chase them down to make sure the documentation, or if they're claiming an exemption. So they're claiming an exemption because they're for sale, or they got an active building permit, or they're under some HPC review right now. That was one of the exemptions. So we have to get that clarified in the law too, that if they're being held up because of some lawsuit, some settlement, some disagreement between inheritance, you know, tax fees, or what, you know, inheritances between who, you know, foreclosures and all that good stuff. Those are exemptions that are permitted in District of Columbia. They have to provide documentation in order to qualify that. So those are some of just the issues that you run into.
But then look at it on the flip side, sorry, is that if we didn't know about that, they're gonna be sitting vacant for another year or 2. So it's that whole accountability issue. I know it's a pain, you know, it's a pain, it is a pain. It probably will be a pain to admit, I don't know. The big thing is, MML is available. Jacqueline Lee, this was all during August, we did our research, and MML was very supportive in drafting the legislation, and they have sort of a network of what works and what didn't work, and, you know, how do you roll this out? I mean, how do you let businesses know? I mean, that's the thing. How do you announce something like this so that you don't have to go out and tell them?
Starts with the inspectors, because they're going to notify when they realize it, and that, again, our question, you know, you and I have been talking about defining what's, you know, determining what's vacant. Is the second floor is vacant? You know, you mentioned storefronts. It's not.
Yeah.
And the reason why I brought up Forest
Commercial.
Drive and looking at, you know, the whole area is that, you know, this is citywide, so this will be applicable to, and it happened to be Forest Drive only because I was looking at numbers. That was raw numbers, and Hollis explained, well, that's the MAIF building. Okay, so that number comes down, but you know, there is it, you know, what if it's one storefront in a shopping center? Do we placard that we placard that storefront, right? Because that's the vacant.
Well, it's an address, so really, if that shopping center can rent one little space on it. That shopping center now doesn't get a sign on it.
Well, that's the
So,
question.
if you look at downtown Annapolis, which is in LA's area, so you got the Starbucks, old Starbucks on Dock Street that's empty, that's been less than a year, so that wouldn't qualify. There's a shop that's been vacant for a long time, halfway up the block, but that was just rented out, that's gonna become the new Lilac Bijou. Yeah, the old Cezanne Jewelers, but they're not the only commercial spot in that building, so they won't get one. And then you have the old Lawrence Clothing Store that just went vacant this summer, so it hasn't been very long, so it won't get one. Maryland Avenue has 3 vacancies. I think the coffee shop now has been vacant for over a year. And so they would get one, and then the 2 other vacancies on Maryland Avenue just happened, so they won't get one. So we're talking one, maybe person that's gonna get it, but he's gonna get 6 phone calls, 1 for each property, repeatedly, that he's gonna be tying himself up with. So it's not, and these people are paying thousands of dollars in property taxes now, so we know who they are, and it's not making them necessarily rent their storefront. And if we only got 6 open, turnover is good in a town. Business, people naturally retire, or, I used to own video stores. We wouldn't want me to keep my video store open today. Times have changed. So, turnover is naturally healthy. I was just reading an article today about Crystal City has a 20% vacancy rate now in their office buildings, and we're talking under 5% citywide. What are we trying to fix? We are much healthier than a lot of communities when it comes to our real estate market at the moment. Does that mean that we have some properties that are falling apart? That coffee shop in Maryland Avenue needs someone to push it, but I don't think $250 is going to make that property owner do what they need to on that property. I can name residential property in my neighborhood where we got historic homes that the whole backside of it is plywood, because we've allowed that home to rot and deteriorate with demolition by neglect. And it's literally now ripping down its next door neighbor's house because we continue to let that home fall apart. I could think another, and that's over behind the courthouse. There's another home over in Northwest Street. I think it's 15 years they've been playing the game of, getting a new work permit every year as it expires and putting a couple nails in the walls while they are disgraced to their community, the way they treat their property. But I don't think $250 is enough, and I don't think a shame of a little sign is going to make a difference. I think it's just going to detract and make the neighborhood worse.
Yeah, Alderman from Latham.
First of all, anything we can do to fill our storefronts, I am in total support of. I have some of the similar questions, Eric, that you just raised. $250 is going to make these folks who have been holding out for bigger bucks to rent their storefronts for, are we trying to get them to rent for less? Or just find somebody to rent? Putting a sign on their front door, I'm not sure that's a deterrent enough. I mean, it may be a deterrent for some, but I suspect some, if they haven't been disturbed by having a vacant storefront, having a sign on the front is probably not going to disturb them any more than they already are. If the unit needs repair, let's say, are they going to be forced by this change to rent it anyway, which means it's probably going to be short term, because somebody else is going to move in there and realize just how ill prepared the building is to house whatever they want to do. I just think there's more questions or more answers that I need. And I'm not saying that I won't support it, because as I started out by saying, every effort is going to make a difference. But I'm not sure the business owners care that much. $250 is not a deterrent to many of them.
And I just want to point out too that there's a difference between a business owner and a property owner.
Right, I'm sorry,
So,
you're right.
and the
I'm
property
talking
owners are even
property
harder
owners.
to corral.
I'm talking property owners, not business owners. And if we post these vacancies on our website, and what do they expect to be our responsibility? Will they then turn around and say, well, you know, I've been trying and you put it on your website and it hasn't helped me, so, you know, you're not giving me the assistance that I need. I just see some repercussions that I would like for us to figure out. 90 days is the timeline. After 90 days, then Pete's department begins the process. And I don't need to say, Pete and my goodness. Alderwoman Tierney tried to amend the budget to give you additional staff, and the council saw fit to not fund that position. So now we're going to add more work to already full plates by doing this, which I will not agree to unless there's funding for additional staffing for the department to do this. But, you know, there's repercussions to our actions, always. And this is just another one. You know, we didn't fund planning and zoning adequately. And now we want them to do another job. It's not going to work.
Sure, I also want to mention too that, you know, if it's the goal of council to reduce the rental rates in downtown Annapolis, property's value is based upon cash flow of what people are willing to pay. So if you're going to try to reduce cash flow to property owners, you reduce property values, and that affects your budget as well.
Mm-hmm.
That also may open you up to liability if someone buys a property based upon expecting to get a certain dollar amount, and you now trying to say that it's your intent to make him make less money.
Mm-hmm.
It's now through no fault of his own that he's not getting that money.
And I don't think that's the intent, and that wasn't
Yeah.
what I was suggesting at all, that we force
Yeah.
them to lower their rent. Though if this goes into effect, they may find that they have to do that in order to get somebody in there, or they keep paying this $250, what is it, annually, until,
Well, it goes up.
It escalates, it goes up.
it goes up to what?
So the first, so that was one of my questions. From 90 days to 2 years, it's $250. So I guess if they're still vacant the second year, it's another $250. After the second year, up to 4 years, it's $500 each year.
Is that actually in the
It's a
bill?
a company
Okay, I'm on the
resolution.
staff, okay.
And then over 4 years, 1,000.
Yeah, may I say, I don't, Sheila, to your point, this isn't meant to be a penalty by any means. This is strictly an inventory. It's us managing the problem, which we have to do.
Well, then what's
And
the
so-
end result, though? I mean,
It's
just
it's
managing
simply
it, or?
the building's owners are taking ownership. They have to fill out a form. They have to tell us what they're doing. Otherwise, nothing happens. And then we, you know, I don't think in the interest of downtown businesses, it's not helpful on Maryland Avenue to look across the street at 3 storefronts. It's not good for anyone. This is just a property owner, again, I'm repeating myself, taking ownership of that he has a responsibility to rent out his property, and he can't just let it sit. And so there, you know, it isn't meant to be a deterrent. It's not meant to be you know, an eyesore or anything. Again, the certificate is just, you know, 8.5 by 11 on white paper in the corner that says, by the way, this is vacant. We know about it. You're on the radar, and, you know, help us help you.
Well,
And it's proven successful.
and I hear what you
Yeah,
say, and
yeah.
I'm not refuting anything that
No,
you
I
said.
know, I understand. But it isn't meant to be a penalty. We can't do that. We tried doing that on the state level. John Astle went back and forth, let's implement a tax. That doesn't, no, we can't do a tax, and why would you want to tax them, you know, unless you gave them some kind of relief if they did rent early. That, just, we can't get into taxing, and this is, you know, just simply registering them, having them register.
I would think it would be of more value for us to encourage them to rent as opposed to simply having an inventory. Because I'm not sure the value of us simply knowing.
But again, it's proven successful for whatever reason it's been,
Well,
and I don't know if you can get into their, I mean,
Well, what I'd be
business of-
interested in knowing is, if it's been proven successful, how long before they get renters?
Okay,
Once they
yeah.
pay the fine, get the placard,
Yeah.
do they continue to do that until it's up to $1,000? Or whatever their penalty is after multiple years?
Yeah.
Or do they take advantage of,
Yeah, I can
the-
get that information.
Yeah,
like
I'd
from
be interested
DC.
in
I sent
knowing.
you some articles on just, I sent you some, well, one article that had a lot of footnotes to other articles about how it's been successful, but yeah, like how, yeah, I mean, DC can say, yeah, this is magically working, because they're on the radar and they know they have to take ownership and find a tenant, but it doesn't, I don't have that data on time. Yeah, but even if it tells me, you know, how many have, if vacancy has improved, you know, because of this. Yeah, and
Okay.
again, the online registration helps. You know, does Pete have to chase down that commercial property on Forest Drive? It's a judgment call, you know? I think it's gonna come down to the repeat offenders. You know, it's one of those things, if you can fix the half a dozen of these problem children, then it's worth doing. But, you know, you don't exhaust your resources on, you know, it's
No.
a small, it's
One
a
in
small
town.
town in a big town in a
Yeah.
way, so.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would like to actually have a little more time to read what you sent. Because is the fee that you're proposing the same that was used in other jurisdictions? Yeah.
Yes, Jacqueline did a great job with that. I mean, there are about 3 or 4 that she, looked at, on.
That
the-
is not attached to my
And then there's
legislation.
non-compliance,
It's a
it goes,
separate
it
resolution.
defaults back to whatever.
Oh, okay, so we're on the
non-compliant languages in Title 17 if they don't do something.
Yeah, it'd be good to know too what kind of,
Okay, thank you.
And
if you could provide any information about the staff. You mentioned staff from other
Some of
jurisdictions.
the articles I send you, sometimes they say, depending on the San Antonio and Washington DC, they dedicated, sorry, in San Antonio and Washington DC, larger cities, they did, but again, they do both, keep in mind, they do both residential and commercial. So that's why they had a
Okay.
staff of 3 or 4, you know, in DC. Can you imagine residential? That's like blighted properties, headache, you know.
And they must have some kind of metrics that they're tracking in
Sure, by now I
terms
think
of
they
commercial
would.
properties at
Yeah.
least. That might be good to know.
Yeah.
And we're happy to do some follow-up research to find out a little bit more about, you know, how quickly it works and how many respond, and so we can do that. But the other thing I was going to say is that, you know, what we've been looking for is some kind of leverage tool to, you know, eradicate some of the vacant buildings that go for years
Yeah.
on our main drags. The Mastercraft building is a good example. The old Belle Saison storefront, the one on Maryland Avenue.
Yeah.
You know, those property owners don't have any incentive.
Exactly, so this the way I kind of see it tying together, which makes complete sense, Alderman Tierney, that you mentioned as a planning tool, as a management tool, and as a tool that can eventually assist you, because, yeah, that is that extra step, that effort as a property owner, like the property owner that owns, I think, that property on Maryland Avenue that we've been referring to, that lives somewhere else and kind of just like forgotten about it, because probably has a bunch of other
Right.
properties. Having to actually take that step,
Yep.
like be cognizant of, you know, her storefront on Maryland and Maryland Avenue in Annapolis. But at the same time, then having that active list of vacancies as a tool for you with potential new businesses coming in, and
Right.
having that kind of real time and kind of a city managed database.
Yeah.
You know, I understand, like Eric knows intimately exactly what vacancies are coming forward and which ones from your relationships with the businesses, but do we have that as a city specific resource? I don't know. So that's a very good point.
Yeah, and Pete and I have talked, and we don't have a central business district. We have a historic district, and limiting it just to the historic district already is sort of pointless, you
Yeah.
know, because there's other areas and stuff. So, but another example is 110 Compromise Street, the old Fawcett's building. Even if that guy just had to fill out every year, hey, whole year has gone by and I haven't rented out this prime property at the, you know, hello, I haven't rented out in a whole year. I mean, you would think the city would say, really now? What you doing? We can't get into their business, but it's like, again, it's managing. We have to. I
Yeah.
just feel strongly about this.
Eric, did you want to?
Yeah, I did, and again, coming back to, we talked about the old coffee shop in Maryland Avenue. I really don't believe that, we have her now in a database, let's say that's official, we could take tenants to that building, but that building needs $100,000 worth of work to it. It's electrically done, it's structural, and it really comes down to that landlord is not going to spend the money to do the repair and things the tenant should, and the tenant's not going to invest 6 figures into someone else's property. So I don't see how that registry works. And we keep referring back to DC. And I think it's important to understand that in DC, they do have about 900 vacant properties, I believe, on their list when I checked. But DC, it's not the registry that works. It's the taxing system that works. So in DC, if your building is vacant, meaning nothing, think of it as that investor property buys it and abandons it, they charge you a 5% tax rate for having an abandoned building. If that building is then deemed a nuisance property, which means the windows are boarded up, it's not being painted, they have a list of things, it's a 10% penalty, a 10% tax rate that they charge you. When you start paying those kind of numbers, if you got a $1 million property and you got to pay a 10% tax rate, that's $100,000 a year that you got to pay. If you're told you got to pay $100,000 a year annually in taxes, you're either going to sell it, you're going to rent it, or you're going to tear it down. So in DC, you see cranes where they're building, you see city blocks on New York Avenue that they've bulldozed, and they're going to do one of those 3 things. And so along with that comes development, which we all know irritates the neighbors who don't want anything new in their backyard. So there's always positive and negatives, with everything. But that's why DC investors are no longer holding on to their property.
I like where you're headed with that, and that actually been kind of recently on my mind around like the tax liens or whatever on vacant properties, not only commercial, but even residential, because of these non-compliance things. And then so either we get more revenue from it and the property owner, makes the investment to upkeep it, or the city takes it over.
You get out of the tax.
I think that's another one for the parking list too.
Yeah.
I'm getting excited here.
Mr. Chair.
We've talked to Senator Astle.
Yeah, I mean, is that something we can do in the city?
Yeah. No, it is.
We can't we would have to go to the state to get permission to tax the business owners. Isn't that what
It would be
Senator
creating a
found?
new class of tax. So instead of having 1 commercial tax rate, you would create 3. If you were to take the DC model, you'd have your regular tax rate, you would have an A and a B, or a 1, 2, 3, however you guys want to do it.
So this is a first step. If you were going to tax them, you'd have to know who they are, so let's get them registered.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of this
Then
as
we
a
can tax 'em.
pilot, as a first
Yeah.
step
Right.
on the path
Yeah.
towards potentially.
Yeah.
The signage, though, can have a negative effect. I mean, if you lived in an apartment on Maryland Avenue above a storefront that's vacant, would you want to stay there? I mean, this weekend at the boat show, we had people who broke into the boat show to climb on boats because they thought they were vacant. Little did they know that somebody was living on that boat, and then they couldn't figure out how to get out of the boat show. But so what happens when we have our chronic homeless people that live downtown and they go, oh, here's a warm spot to stay. My own neighborhood for years had a home that was not occupied and had homeless living in its backyard because they knew the property was vacant. What happens if somebody thinks it's fun to create arson, be an arsonist, because they're not going to hurt anybody because the city has said the building is vacant when the apartment upstairs is occupied or the person next door is living there? Be careful of unintended consequences.
Sorry, just one thing and then I'll go to you, Rob. Yeah, I mean, I completely understand that, but I feel like that premise kind of is almost like when jurisdictions kind of impose really restrictive voter ID laws or because of voter fraud, which is negligent. What kind of a real problem are we having in Annapolis with our vacancies around homelessness, like homeless people sleeping there, arsonists, people breaking in? Is that an ongoing major
Yes.
issue?
It is in the residential communities.
Really?
Yes, it is.
That's
Wow.
why I'd like to see it extend to residential.
So it is. Okay. Yeah.
And I
Oh, yeah,
can
if this is
cite
successful,
two
we can-
specific examples, one being my grandmother's house in Eastport, and the other being the Bates Bates Legacy Center now, but the Bates Building.
So it
That's-
is an issue.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I'd like to know, I'm not currently in a place where I feel comfortable supporting this yet. I'm not quite confident on voting in support of this yet. I think I'd like to know some more information first, because I do agree that I think we do need to do whatever we can to try to, get these places filled and to work against the vacancies. But I do hear the concerns from, I'm a little concerned that our economic development people do have some concerns about some of the implications of it. So, and also like some of the numbers from DC, and I think one of the things that would help me make up my mind would be if you have any other numbers about vacancies. You went over a few of them for Main Street and Maryland Ave, but if you have anything else that you could provide, because I'd like to know, that'll give me an idea of what we're talking about, how much money we could be getting from this, how long these businesses have been open, and look at some of the DC numbers to find out if that is an incentive or is it the tax program. I'm just not quite.
Yeah, I
And in
might be
terms
able
of
to
what
get
you're
them from
saying, in
MML.
terms of this being
Yeah.
the first step towards potentially doing a tax, I understand, but I think we first need to figure out if the tax is even possible. Because I
Right.
am, Alderwoman Finlayson has said, I am also concerned about giving too much work to staff. So that's why I think getting some of these numbers will kind of help me understand that a little more.
Yeah, I'll see what MML has. But Eric and I have talked about the sign every storefront, at least I see on Main Street or Maryland Avenue, has for lease on it, so it's vacant anyway. So to add a little corner thing actually, I think, works the other way, and it says, yeah, we know it's vacant and we're keeping our eyes on it. So it's not totally abandoned.
Yeah,
you know.
no, I definitely support the spirit and the objective of the legislation. I'm just looking for ways where we can make it even better, So I think, because I do see it as a really good planning tool. I don't think it's our local government's business to actually create businesses, but it is to probably support through regulatory forms or methods. And if this is a tool that we can use, because as we know, economic development does not happen organically. So if this is a tool, we can help manage, the portfolio of vacancies and storefronts and recruitment efforts, and I think it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, to your point, it's a good point. It doesn't happen organically, but in our situation, we're more skew. There's just something making us skew, and anyway.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chair, should we maybe take no action
Yeah.
today?
Postpone
Great.
action on it.
Yeah.
I think postpone action, but with some homework for next month, probably, like, if you don't mind putting in some thought into this and other legislation, and some recommendations. Some
Yeah.
numbers. I think that would be great, as well as, I think out of this, we'd like to start creating kind of a parking list. Yeah, I don't know if we can take note of that in terms of ideas that are coming out of this. So one being the small and minority business kind of policy and goal and framework, and how we can tie that into the procurement legislation and process. To, this 04018 kind of as a step, as a first kind of pilot, how we can make it, to minimize the burden on Pete's department.
May I ask, in bringing the research back, that we be inclusive of the taxing structure that Eric mentioned?
Yes.
And if San Diego does something similar, I'd like to get the full picture of how their programs work, because it sounds like, one piece of it is the registration, but the other piece is the taxing piece
Yeah.
that may help to make it work.
I'm not familiar with the tax program.
We can find that.
Well, the one Eric was talking about, if you have a abandoned or blighted or a vacant, yeah, I think we should see all of that.
Yeah. Who can take ownership of? Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Great.
All right.
do we need to take formal action on postponing?
I move postponement of well, we're dealing with R4218 as well as, 04018. So we're gonna postpone action on both.
I'll second.
All in favor of postponing action on 04018 and R4218, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Well, this was a first, good one, huh?
This is wonderful,
Ah.
actually.
That was great. I know. I saw the emails. Sorry for my delay.
Eric and I, we have a love-hate relationship.
I'd like to move, we adjourn?
Oh, yeah.
No,
Or
no,
no, I think that-
is that, yeah, that's.
Oh,
Ms.
Oh,
Finch
yeah,
in
that's
the
right.
back, I
Oh,
think.
okay, I didn't know.
Is that Ms. Finch?
Ms. Finch, is that you in the back? Oh, hi.
Yeah.
Would you like to come forward, please? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
I'll just sit there, it's fine. Thanks. How are you today? Good, thank you for coming. So we're here just to have a little conversation about your reappointment to the Historic Preservation Commission. First of all, thank you for serving on it, and thank you again and for your continued volunteer efforts and the importance of the Historic Preservation Commission. I think it's the HPC has been even elevated more in terms of the attention paid to it, obviously, with everything going on. But I don't really have any specific questions unless my colleagues do.
Well, I'd like to ask if you could share with us why you want to continue on the Historic Preservation Commission. Normally I'd ask why you want to be on it, but you've been on it for some time, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've learned a lot being on the commission, and especially learned a lot about the city and the historic character of the city and how it works together. And as you gather more experience in looking at these problems, I think you do develop a skill in it. And to me, it allows me to explore Annapolis. It gives me a good reason to go out and look at buildings that I might not have looked at carefully before and read their history, because we have excellent staff who does a thorough background on it, and then compare it to other similar cases, although every case is unique, that we've looked at, and I have a history, now I know a history of how we generally deal with that kind of issue. So I feel that experience informs moving forward, and historic preservation is a personal interest of mine, so it's a way I can serve in city government.
It's wonderful.
Wonderful, thank you.
And I think Ms. Finch is being a little humble because she's talking about her passion about historic preservation, but looking at your resume, it's like, wow, it's impressive. Certificate program in historic preservation, graduate coursework in urban community planning, environmental science and forestry at Syracuse University, principal urban design. Wow, this is an amazing skill set, asset. Well, thank you for bringing that to the table.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Finch, for being willing to volunteer again. I do have some questions. Just want to ask you, because you do have quite a bit of environmental background. That is your background. So, how have you been able to use that when you're serving on the Historic Preservation Commission?
Oh, yeah, I'm a certified arborist,
Yeah.
And so I used to go out, and I have gone out and looked at street trees and things like that, and been asked to comment on those things, existing trees on sites and site design. We've been working on, I find the work that was being done previously about sea level rise and, the effects of flooding and things on the city to be very timely. And actually, I think the work that was done here on sea level rise and flooding, it is actually being taken as a national model at this point. You go out to conferences and people are talking about, the thoughtful approach Annapolis has been taking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's wonderful that we've been able to pull those things together.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds like a very useful and helpful skill set to have at this point.
Mhm.
Good perspective for the city to have too.
Well, related to that question, and something that I think about sometimes is, because I guess there's always been some sort of battle between being able to make certain changes in residential, specifically residential units in the historic preservation district. So I'm thinking like windows,
Mhm.
right? What's the whole issue with like, what's the issue with windows? Like there could be some energy saving kind of windows, but HPC doesn't want it or allow it. And
Well, I mean, we have design guidelines that guide us, and the desire in most cases is if the windows are in good condition to keep the windows, because older wooden windows have a lot of integrity and actually if they're taken care of or repaired, they'll last longer than vinyl windows. And actually, you can achieve the same energy efficiency through various means using that. Now, I have a house that was built in 1926,
wow.
and I still have the original windows. And there's a lot of techniques that have been come about to repair windows at this point, because it's hard to duplicate the quality of the wood.
Yeah.
First of all, is in the frames and things that they're set up to live for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, in cases where the windows would be hard to replace, actually, one of the hardest ones we have was a building that had metal windows. Now, metal windows are incredibly inefficient, and nobody even makes them anymore, really. And someone took out the metal windows out of one of their offices, and so it was after the fact approval. We had to go back and look at it, and we did allow them to go ahead with the replacement, because we really couldn't go back and find replacement windows for that. But it's on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
May I add, again, I was on the Maryland Hall board, I guess it's been well over 20 years ago. I was on the board that hired Linnell Bowen.
Yeah.
And I remember when we replaced the windows in that building at considerable expense, because it's on the historical registry. So we couldn't just put in vinyl windows
Yeah.
or anything other than those that would maintain the historical integrity of the building.
Mhm.
So it does matter, what the material is that's being replaced, especially in buildings that have historical significance.
Mhm.
Mr. Chair, I recognize Ms. Finch's traditional and wealth of knowledge, and I would move that we give a favorable recommendation to her reappointment.
Second.
Great. All in favor of reappointing Ms. Kim Finch to the Historic Preservation Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions for us? I forgot to ask.
No, I just feel like I know several of you pretty well at this point.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Meeting adjourned. 5:31. Mr. Kenny?